All right. Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone. It's episode 83 with Joey Odell, founder, host of Fu3k Suicide Podcast. Brother, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. It's good to be here.
Am I allowed to say the fuck or?
Yeah, you can say whatever you like. There's no censorship where I come from, that's for sure.
First question straight off the bat, brother. Could you please describe the way that you view yourself as a man and or human?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever really thought about that. I guess as a man and or human, I guess I'd like to see myself as courageous, and supportive. Like, it's a funny thing, like opening up about yourself. I mean, something that I think a lot of people go through is they think about, maybe my story is not as big as somebody else's story and it's not that important to share. And it's like, well, I think I thought that for a while, but at the end of the day, it's like, you never really know what people are going to take from your story. You never know what, other people might attach to that gives them a little bit of hope or inspires them. So it's, just being courageous enough to be able to share in hope that you will support someone. So that in itself, I suppose, resembles how I am as a man and human, I guess.
That's perfect, man. That's a good answer.
Unscripted as well, man. Unscripted.
Nice. Free flow. For anyone who isn't aware yet, could you please, the title's self-explanatory, but could you give us a breakdown of what the Fu3k Suicide Podcast is and why you've done it?
Yeah, man, of course. So suicide for me is something I brushed up on mainly for myself. I don't know too many people that have experienced it or been involved in it that have been open enough to share that with me. But it's something I experienced around 8 years ago now, going through some pretty shitty times, trying to avoid a few things that we'll get into a bit later on in the podcast, I'm sure. But I got to a point in my life where I wanted to do something and really realize what my true calling was. And as much as I love the stuff that people are doing out there with mental health, like yourself, especially in terms of what you talk about, it's, for me, I wanted to create something that was completely unfiltered, completely unscripted, that could let people say what they want and shared what they want. And, if they really wanted to say, fuck suicide, it's bullshit, then they can get to a point where you can do that. Something that's really, really raw and open. And, I think a lot of people find it hard to censor themselves when talking about stuff like this. And it's nice for people to be able to have that outlet, to be able to open up and really be as raw as it could possibly be.
Cool. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
Let's dive straight into your story, seeing as your story does start in childhood. You happy to walk us through it from there?
Yeah, of course, man. Like, please feel free to I do tend to waffle on a little bit sometimes, so feel free to dial me in if I start drifting. But so basically, it all started even before I was born for me. So when my mum fell pregnant with me, she or my dad did a runner, or I don't really know 100% the story, but it basically wasn't there for my mum during pregnancy. She had to deal with that all by herself, and then obviously giving birth by herself and pretty much raising me by herself up until I was about 5 years old. I found out that my dad had passed away. So I was massively short of that father figure growing up from day one. I was lucky enough to have a beautiful, beautiful supportive family around me. A lovely granddad, grandma, aunties, uncles, a really, really tight network of people. So I wasn't short by any means, but having that lack of a father figure, that solid man in the home, throughout my entire life, as much as my granddad was there for me, it took its toll. As a kid, when you're growing up, you try to you're trying to figure the world out, trying to figure out what's going on. And one of the big things for me is that all my friends have got dads in the house, and here's just me and my mum. So that for me was really confusing. And obviously there was some nights crying myself to sleep, not knowing what's going on, from what I remember. And I don't really know how that equated to like being a teenager, but I often used to find myself as a bit of a loner as a teenager, wandering from groups of friends to groups of friends. Not that I didn't have any friends, so to speak. I had plenty, but I never had a good, solid group of friends that were, I don't really know how to put it, but it was, I guess, like I always found myself wandering around the playground just by myself, wondering if there was nothing going on. I'd move from one group of people to the next, talking, but never really found a solid like place to fit in.
Yeah.
Which it made it hard. I guess it made me very insecure about myself. I remember for a large part of my teenage life, I grew up thinking that the Truman Show was a real thing, and that I was in it. And it was. I don't know how that really equates to not having a father figure around, but I guess it's just a build-up of insecurities and not knowing really how the world works, and constantly thinking the world's against you from the get-go.
When you say insecurities, what do you mean by that?
Just shy, man. Like really, really shy. Like I guess for growing up as a teenage lad, around 11, 12 years old, things start changing, and things started changing quite young for me. I think I was about 10, 11 maybe when I started hitting puberty. So like obviously delving into the world of girls and things like that, man, I could not speak to a member of the opposite sex for love nor money. Like trying to be, I don't know, strong enough or have the balls, so to speak, to go up to a woman was a really, really tough thing for me to do. I mean, I don't know what it's like over here, but pressure at that age to get a girlfriend, and in high school and things like that, you're often teased and whatnot. And I remember making up stories about girls I fancied, going out with them and things like that. It was all bullshit. But it's
Are you Jay from the In-Betweeners?
Yeah, it kind of feels a little bit like that. It wasn't quite that bad, but yeah, it was definitely like made up a few stories just to feel like I fit in, if you know what I mean.
Yep. I can understand why you found that hard, because obviously as guys we model the way that we treat women off of how our father and our mother interact. So if you never had a father, then you don't have a role model to show you how you're supposed to interact with a woman at all.
Yeah, I guess that's the point. I mean, like I said, man, I was really, really lucky to have my granddad. Like, he was there for me. Like, he really understood and took on that role as best as he could. But, he had his own home, he had his own family to look after and things like that. I mean, He was round at my house every day, but I guess it was those moments when you're really stuck and you don't know what to do. You don't know, you get emotional and things like that. That doesn't happen at the same time someone's around every day. So the only person I really had to go and ask was my mum. So she did a great job raising me and everything. But yeah, it was tough. I turned into a little shit pretty quickly when I was growing up. I think I started drinking on the streets when I was 13.
Wow.
And my mum didn't have much control over me back then.
Yeah.
I think it was just a massive learning curve for her.
When you said you were pretty shy, yet you'd like bounce around from group to group and never really immerse yourself in one group like wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Looking back now, do you feel like you ever felt like you were enough, or that you deserved love and appreciation, like knowing that your dad ran away as a baby or while you were in the womb?
So I don't know, to be honest with you. Like, I've never really gone and thought about it like that. I guess it's the first time I've ever been asked that question, but I never felt neglected. It's just I never really felt connected, more to the point. It was like, I remember there being an advert on TV at the time for pot noodles. I don't know if he had that over there at the time, but it was an advert about this white guy, and he had this. It was, I don't know, I don't remember why, but there was this big black African or Jamaican fella called Big Dave, and all my mates at the time used to joke, "Oh, there's Joey going off with Big Dave again," and I found it funny at the time, and I didn't get upset by it at all, but that's kind of like how it was. Like I was wandering off by myself. Like I even remember when I'd be going drinking in the streets with my mates, I'd go off and wander off by myself for a little bit, and you know. I was an only child as well until I was 18, so it was literally me and my mum. So when my mum was busy, I was just by myself doing my own thing, which was, had its ups and downs, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean that makes it a whole lot harder when you go into a place like high school where the pressure to connect is huge.
Yeah, it's funny, man. It's like I'm talking to one of my friends and had a chat to his son who was around the time where I started to realize I was, going through a little bit of stuff. And I remember the way I spoke to my mum. And it was funny. She sent me I think it was just after I had this conversation, she sent me a letter that I'd written to her telling her that I wanted to kill myself. And I was like, fuck. I was like, wow. And my missus laughs at it because I'd I signed it at the bottom. I was like, with no love at the moment, love Joseph. It was, but I remember my mum crying when I wrote that, man. I was like, yeah, it was a rough time going through childhood, like getting your first girlfriend and things like that. It was hard.
So when did you write that?
I think I might have been 14 when I wrote that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, just obviously felt like things weren't quite right. Like, I don't really remember a lot, but yeah, obviously writing that, it's going to be having a lot of shit going on.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. If you never felt connected, then, not being connected means you're alone. So,
yeah, true.
In a world where you constantly feel alone, it's easy to feel like you don't want to be here, especially if you're seeing other people like as part of groups and like fully immersing themselves and having fun. It's going to be a lonely world, man. And I don't think many people want to live in a world like that. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, it's funny, like, I don't ever remember like not having fun. Like, I went to parties, I was engaging, I was in the mix, but yeah, I think there was that general lack of connection that kind of followed me around for quite a few years until I started traveling. I never really had a solid set of friends that I hung around with.
Yep.
I always tended to bounce around from one group of friends to the next. And then it wasn't until I got my first serious girlfriend that's when I realized, oh wow, like I really just try and latch onto people to try and absorb everything I can from them, and then pretty much ditch everybody else around me, which was not a great thing, not a great place to be in as well.
Did that only start with that girlfriend?
I think so, yeah. Like, I'll be honest with you, man. Like my teenage years are not the fondest. Like I said, the Truman Show thing was really paranoid the hell out of me. Like, I'd get to the point where I think I remember I was about 14, 15 years old. I would do things like specifically to remember them at nighttime. And then I would be watching people the next day to see whether they'd pick up on anything that I'd done the night before, like paranoid as hell that people were watching me. And I'd be so like in depth, like listening to every word that people would say, hoping that they'd prove me right, that someone's watching me, if you know what I mean.
Wow, man. That just adds another layer to that connection issue.
Yeah, man.
Like if you feel like everyone's watching you, you're part of a Truman Show, you're not going to want to connect and give all of yourself, because what if it is true?
Well, yeah, very much so, yeah.
Far out. So looking back now, obviously hindsight's 2020. Do you have any idea where that came from? That level of sort of paranoia?
I mean, I've done I've done a lot of work on myself especially over the past 5 years, especially, and a lot of self-development and trying to understand every problem that I go through and why it happens and why it exists. And I honestly bury most of it down to just from not being wanted, or that feeling of not being wanted, like being completely rejected by someone who's apparently designed to love and care about you from birth. Not having that and understanding more about what a father should be growing up as an adult, and then realizing you don't have it, then yeah, that screwed with me a lot. I would bury a lot of my issues that I've had over life towards that.
Okay. Well, it's intense that it'd manifest as paranoia, bro. That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's a lot of burying.
Yeah,
moving on to, you said your first relationship went a little bit sideways. Can you walk us through that one?
Yeah, so first girlfriend, I mean, I had one girlfriend or two girlfriends in high school, but they're more the holding hands and kissing kind of things. There's nothing too serious, no matter how heartbreaking you think they are at the time. But yeah, my first girlfriend was back in Manchester in the UK. Pretty much the first girl I'd met that had any interest in me. I was just like, yep, I'm going to dive straight into this. I don't care who she is, whatever. I'll just put my heart and soul into it and see what happens. And I've had chats to her in the past, actually, like many, many years ago now, but even she's come back to me and apologized for the way she treated me, which was nice in itself. But it'd be the point where, like, I'd go around to her house and she'd make me sleep on the floor rather than the bed so she could get a better night's sleep. And I'd just be like, yep, no worries, I'll do that.
Well,
yeah. And then, I just accept anything just to have this sense of connection, I guess.
Well, so like pretty much becoming a pleaser to keep someone you care about around you.
Yeah, massively.
Wow.
Massively. And then I remember it, I didn't break up with her at this point. I think I stayed with her for another 3 months, hoping that something would change, until I finally got it in myself one day to break up with her. She had our mutual friend, the person we met through. They went out together one night, and then I don't know what happened. I don't know whether they kissed or they slept together or whatnot. But the thing that pissed me off the most was that he was allowed to sleep in her bed and I wasn't. And I was like, what a fucking bitch. But after all this time being with her, he was allowed to sleep in her bed and I wasn't. And that's what got me the most, which was really, really, like, it didn't matter what else might have happened. It was that sort of disrespect was a different level for me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, especially if you're going out of your way to please her by sleeping on the floor willingly.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, that's
that was a cracker for me. But so yeah, I think that lasted about 8 months, and him and her was after about 5 or 6 months, and then she just kept that when things started going downhill, she just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I was just like, one day I was like, I can't do this anymore, and just crying my eyes out, broke up with her as if it was my fault. And I think I took all that onto myself. And then it wasn't long after that I got another girlfriend. I got a new job, started in a new workplace. I tried very, very hard to get a girlfriend, through work from different girls, like literally throwing myself at them just to hope that they would accept what I had to give, until I met this girl from Latvia. And I don't know whether it was cultural differences or whatever, but she accepted that way of me being, because that's something that she never had before. So I was like, oh, wow. So we got together, and then I think it lasted about 18 months to 2 years, close to. And we'd made plans to do stuff. She told me what she wanted. I told her what I wanted. And in hindsight, or in reality, or how it was then anyway, was we both wanted the same thing. Like, it'd always been a dream of mine to come over here and move to Australia. I told her I wanted that, and I told her I wanted to go traveling and lots of other stuff. And she played along with that for the best part of a year. And then one day she got drunk and burst out crying, told me she wanted none of it, and then told me that within the first few weeks of us being in a relationship together, she cheated on me. And I was like, wow, another one? And I was like, okay. So I just kind of accepted it, tried to get past it and just dealt with it, hoping that she'd change her mind or hoping that something would change. And yeah, that ended in me having enough again and not really understanding what to do. And then I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm done. Can't be bothered with this now. I need to get the hell out of Dodge, and decided to run away.
Wow.
Yeah.
With those two relationships, looking back now, do you have an understanding of how you got yourself in a position where two separate women would do something like that or do something similar?
To a degree, yeah. Like, I guess if you're putting yourself on somebody and being very forthright with what you want, especially at that age, I don't think anybody really knows truly what they want. They just have an idea. So when they find something like the second girl, for example, when they find something that, you know, they seem to like and it's new for them and it's exciting and they seem to care about it, then I guess people will do anything to try and make you happy. And that includes lying to you about, you know, what really is. In terms of cheating, I guess it's, for me, I look back and it's like, I was a pushover. Like, I would have accepted anything you told me. Like, if you told me to do this, I would have gone, yep, no problem. Jump this high, yep, no problem. Fall down on the ground and let me walk all over you, no problem, I'll do that. Yeah. And I guess that not holding my own and not being strong for what I wanted does push people, especially women, to seek that strong male. I don't know whether you call it a stereotype or not, but that strong masculine sort of vibe. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think I know what you know what I'm talking about. And it's funny, I remember, it's funny now because I run a boxing gym. I remember the first girl saying, fuck, you need to toughen up. I think you should go and do some boxing. And I never went and did any, but for some reason now I run a boxing gym, so it's kind of ironic.
It's sunk in over time.
yeah.
But that's, I can understand why, like not having a male role model to model yourself off of, then of course you're going to clutch at straws and throw yourself like that, be the pleaser. And if you are being the pleaser, if you're being over the top, and if your partner feels like no matter what they do, they're not going to lose you, then obviously they're not going to care too much, you know, within what they do. I think I was exactly the same with my first girlfriend. Although, like, after we got back together, I cheated on her fucking every week. Beforehand, I was the person who was like writing love letters and throwing myself out there and like planning marriage when I was 15, you know, writing love letters about that. And then the day after, I remember getting broken up with and then seeing her on the field with my best friend.
Yeah, that sounds so too familiar, unfortunately. Yeah.
But that's the problem, man. When you give that much of yourself up, there's nothing left for yourself. So self-respect goes out the window. Yeah,
that's very true, man. That's something I remember not having any of, really, at the time. And it's weird because I look back at life now and I look at when I was that age about the things that were going on. And it's like, wow, there was like some pretty amazing shit going on around me apart from the relationship. But the only thing that seems to really stand out back then was like, wow, this terrible relationship, or terrible. It felt terrible at the time. Now it's given me some good understanding of where I've come from, which is good.
Yeah. One more question about that.
Yeah,
knowing
sure.
like your dad left the way he did and then left your mum to raise you. Looking back now, do you feel there's any hint of wanting to be the opposite of your dad?
Oh, 100%, man. Like, I wouldn't say be 100. Well, I wouldn't be the opposite, but definitely not be the guy that that he was to me. Like, I can't. The only reason I can't say opposite is because I don't really even know who the hell he is.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny. This year, I found his side of the family for the first time in my life, which was pretty eye-opening. Like, this year's been a bit mad with stuff like that. But yeah, I've not known anything about him, where he's from, where he's grown up. So to say opposite, yes, in a way, because of the whole leaving my mum thing. But I don't really think you can be the opposite of someone if you don't really know who they are.
Yep. But in terms of you staying around when you get cheated on and hoping it'll change, being the opposite of a guy that runs away by staying even though someone cheats on you.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, yeah, when you put it like that.
Now let's get on to the part where you start traveling, man.
Yeah, wow. So 7 years, man. 7 years of traveling the world. All off a whim. It was after that last relationship.
Sorry, how old were you?
I was 22, I think. 21, 22, I think, when I first started traveling. Broke up and just was like, okay, what can I do? I don't want to be in Manchester anymore. I don't want to be near this girl anymore. I need something fresh. So along came a mate and said, oh, why don't you go on cruise ships? And I was like, that's a great idea. So I was like, okay, applied for the job. I think I had an interview 3 weeks later, and then I got the job a week after that, and then I had to wait a month to get visas and all sorts of stuff like that, and then I was gone. But it was really mad. It's like things, I think from there on in, things started to happen that didn't really make much sense. Like, I don't know if you've ever been on a point where you think you're on the right path and the world just kind of does things for you to help you along. And it's like, I got a job, and apparently this was never, ever done.
Can you pull your mic away from your beard? It's just like grazing it.
That old chestnut, yeah, that problem. Yeah, so I had an interview, and it was all over the phone, and they never do interviews over the phone only. Usually I have to have a face-to-face interview because me being who I am, covered in tattoos, they don't hire people with tattoos.
Yeah.
It was just because you have to wear short sleeve shirts and they want you clean skin. And I was like, well, okay, well, that was a first start. And then obviously got the job, got there, and the first thing they did was go, how the hell did you get a job? You've got tattoos. It's like, and I had them on my hand as well. So it's like, oh, well, like, you got the job now, there's nothing we can do. You got a contract. So it's like, okay, happy days. So that was 2008 or 2007, I think. I went on my first contract. Wow, man, what an experience. And literally 2 weeks later, I snapped my ACL playing football and got sent home. So I thought, oh man, that's the end of it all already. Short but sweet. But those 2 weeks, man, were an eye-opener that this was what I wanted to do. No matter what, I'm going to get back, and I'm going to get back on here, and this is exactly what I'm going to do. So
why is that?
It was just freedom, man. Like, you've never experienced in your life. Like, the life on board a cruise ship is very, very different. Like, I can compare it to FIFO work for those that are in Australia and New Zealand that understand that. I can compare it to that lifestyle, but imagine that on a boat where you're not isolated from people. Like, the people that you're around for 8 months at a time. So you make family, you make friends there, and you basically surround yourself with the people that you need to surround yourself with. And obviously it's, you're in an environment where people are on holiday, so it's a bit more highly spirited than the FIFO industry. So parties, you're traveling the world, so you're not just stuck on a mine site. You're going off into Caribbean islands. Like, I remember getting to Miami on my first day. Never been to America before. Get to Miami, see the ship, wide open eyes at this ship, and I was like, bloody hell, man, this is massive. Get on the ship, and first night I'm on board, I'm getting absolutely smashed with a group of people I feel like I've known for years. because everyone's just so open and in the same spot. They're just like, wow, it's just one big party. Everyone wants to have fun because, what else is there? What else is there to do? You're stuck in a tin can for 8 months. So it was a wild lifestyle, man. And I think in my first.
Brother.
Oh, sorry, buddy. Pull it out a bit more. I think in the first week, I'd been on board. I'd been to 5 different countries already in a week. So that for me was like, yeah, wow. This is the life.
And that's a stark contrast to that kid who never immersed himself to now being like thrust into this cruise ship role where you like typically wouldn't fit in because of your tattoos. Yeah. And then now just being a part of a family on this big ship for 8 months at a time. That's powerful, man.
Yeah, it was. And it was the best place to forget about a girlfriend. Like, talk about frivolous women and an easygoing lifestyle that was very, very eye-opening and a great distraction. Like, literally exactly what I needed at the time. Obviously, I'll go into a little bit later about why it ended up not being the best thing, but it was amazing. But yeah, I think 2 or 3 weeks in, playing football outside, tore my ligaments in my knee playing football, soccer, and luckily got all my surgery and all my medical stuff paid for over in America, which wasn't cheap, because it was the captain that took me out, the captain of the ship that took me out, so he felt bad. But then, I recovered while I was back. Obviously, you get into familiar spaces, get back with the ex, get all lovey-dovey again, forget about past problems, and then eventually went back on board and moved on with the rest of my life from there on in, working on cruise ships for a living. And man, like 7 years. I can't count how many countries I went to, but all I know is I visited every single continent on the planet. Been to an experience. You would have to pay millions and millions of dollars to go and see the things I've seen and be the places I've been. Like, if you were doing it on a holiday, it's just, I've been to places that I didn't even know existed, man. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
What are a couple of the takeaways you've taken away from that time abroad, time traveling for 7 years?
Well, when I was working in the casinos back in the UK, I was one of the lads that, worked pub, went home to the missus, worked pub. That was life. So going and traveling and seeing all these different places, but more importantly, meeting all these different people from different walks of life, changed my outlook massively on life, changed how I think about the world and the way things work and how I approach people. I mean, on a ship, you're working with maybe 20 or 30 different nationalities at a time. So you're having to try to understand other people's customs, other people's way of life. You're getting invited to all these parties that are all themed, like Romanian parties, Filipino parties, Croatian parties, Italian parties, you name it. Like there's a party for every different nationality. It's great, but it taught me a lot about society and humbled me in a massive, massive way, which was beautiful to be able to take that away from it.
That's amazing, man. Especially for someone who couldn't immerse themselves fully in a group, to be put in that position. We have to communicate with other nationalities and probably don't speak some of the languages that those people spoke. To be in that position and not understand culture, that's an amazing learning curve. Like having to pick up that sort of communication skill.
Yeah, man, it was massively. I mean, I remember when I first came on board, I had to change my accent. I had such a strong English accent, like especially from the north of England, that people couldn't understand what I was saying. I had to slow my voice down. I had to think and speak more like the Queen, so to speak, just to be able to get people to understand me. Because, I mean, you've heard Oasis talk. Like my accent was like thick Manchester,
Wow.
big, thick Manchester accent. So you speak to someone Russian and they're just looking at me like, "Are you talking English?" And I'm like, "Yeah." No, it was hard, man. It was hard, but it was all part of the learning curve. But it's funny you should say like about immersing myself in a group. It's funny because on the surface it seems like I jumped from something that was where I wasn't submersing myself in things into something where I was. But in the end, what I found out, it was exactly the same thing that I was doing. Because with cruise ships, it's like people are there for such a short amount of time. They're there for 8 months. People come, people go. Like you make a lot of friends, and you take away a lot of beautiful people that you can keep in contact with on Facebook. But that was it. Like you were never there long enough to be able to create lots and lots of true friendships. So you every cruise, the end of every cruise, you'd be saying goodbye to somebody. You'd be saying goodbye to another friend. So it was like I was floating in this existence that suited this kid that I used to be,
Wow.
which is
That's a powerful insight, man.
yeah.
Fast forward to the end of that, and this is something I'm interested in myself, is how did you transition from that lifestyle, like obviously loving your life, and I guess 7 years, that's enough time to then identify as this guy who does travel, who does have fun, who does experience this sort of stuff. How do you transition out of that?
It's funny you should say that, man, because I think for me that's where my interaction with depression and suicide really started. Um, I think I was about 4 or 5 years in, and while I was on board one of my ships, my uncle passed away, and
Wow.
that was really hard for me being away from family and dealing with that. And then a year later, my granddad, who's my father figure pretty much, who I learned everything I knew about being a man, I learned that from him. And then he passed away, and at the time, I had a decision to make, whether I wanted to go home and be with my family or carry on doing what I was doing. And because I was in that place of I was doing this for a distraction, I just thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to stay here. I don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't want to deal with losing him. I don't want to deal with that sadness. I just don't want to. I just don't want to accept it. So after, obviously, at the time I was very, very upset for a good week or so, and then being in that position, I kind of got very good at burying feelings, burying problems and things like that, because it was easy. If in the normal world, if you've got problems, you deal with them day in, day out. You've got the same familiar faces at work, same familiar, routes and routines that you follow. Whereas, 2 days later, I was on an island and I could go jet skiing to take my mind off it. And then 2 days after that, I could go skydiving, or I could go sit on a beach, a tropical beach somewhere, and just drink mojitos all day long. There was always something new and fresh to do. So it was the best distraction ever. But then I remember meeting a girl, slightly illegally. We weren't allowed to date passengers at all. And she came on board the ship. And we didn't do anything at that time. But when I met her, I was like blown away. And what better distraction to get yourself over something emotional by burying yourself into something new that's emotional. So started a new relationship with this girl. She came back and forth after a holiday on the ship, traveling, came on the ship and spent a little bit of time with me, and then decided after the end of that contract to quit and go and move to Queensland with her.
Wow.
And seemed like a great idea at the time. Funnily enough, the day I quit was the same day that that cruise ship in Italy crashed and sunk, which is, I don't know whether that's some some sort of coincidence. I don't know, yeah. But yeah, that was all over the news. The very
Wow.
day that I quit, that was all over the news, which was really funny. Well, not really, but it was ironic. So then I ended up moving to Queensland with her, and then, as you say, that's where the question came in. How do you get through something like that? And I had no idea at the time. So I moved to a part of central Queensland where there's basically fucking nothing and no one, in a town called Rockhampton. So I don't know how many people were there, but everybody knew each other. So it's one of those sorts of towns. So to try and fit in there was difficult at first, but I didn't care. It was something fresh, something new. But the problem was then those days on the beach, those jet skiing, skydiving, those sort of experiences weren't there to distract me anymore. So after, I think it was about 6 months, I noticed that me and her were arguing all the time about nothing. And a small argument would take me into like some feat of rage. I was getting super angry, super stressed all the time. And sorry, man, my phone just started ringing.
It's all right.
There we go. Yeah, so I started getting super angry and super stressed all the time for no reason. And one day, I just thought, you know what, fuck this. I've got to get the fuck out of here. Like, no friends at all. Started playing football to try and get friends. Didn't work at all. Started working at a pub. Didn't really get any friends there either. So that's pretty much when I wasn't with her, I was by myself. And don't get me wrong, like, her family were beautiful. They welcomed me in with open arms, like you wouldn't believe. And she was a lovely, lovely girl, but what a shit time to meet me. So I soon realized that all that pain and all the trauma from losing my granddad had started to surface. And I was very aware of it. And I was just like, I've got to find my distraction again. And where better place to go to than go back to cruise ships?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of running, man.
Mate, like, I did that girl horribly wrong. Like, I said, oh yeah, I'm going to come back, no problem. I'll come back, and I just want to go away for one contract and save some money. And I think in my head I had absolutely no intention of ever returning. And as much as I wanted to, and it's the idea is there. I think deep down I was like, no, I've just got to run, and I just wanted to run. And funnily enough, I did a lot of running around that time, like literal running. Like, running was my thing.
Wow, that's pretty profound, man. That insight, like knowing how your dad left and then you doing similar to her. That's a profound turnaround and like a stark contrast to the guy that you were in those relationships at the start. That's what buried trauma does, man. It makes you do silly shit.
It's very true, man. Very, very true. And like, unfortunately, I've never been able to really apologize to her for what I did and how I behaved. And that, I think, has probably got to be, I try not to regret anything, but not having that chance to apologize in person has probably weighed down on my soul for many, many, many years since.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like, it's hard when you carry that around with you, especially when you realize what, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but what a cunt you've been.
Yeah.
And it's when you carry that around with you, it brings with you a lot of problems. It's like another bag that you've packed on your back that you want so much to apologize for, but you just can't have that opportunity, because why would the person ever want to, even hear your voice, let alone, sit down and have a conversation with you?
I understand that 100%, man. I tried to force my daughter's mum into an abortion, and then when that fell through, I just treated her horribly for her whole pregnancy. So much so that she moved interstate to get away from me when she gave birth. And then when they moved back, I remember apologizing to her all the time. And I remember her saying, man, I forgave you ages ago. It's time you forgive yourself. And I think that's the beautiful thing about doing self-work, self-development, like you spoke about before we started recording. You finally get to a point where you're content enough within yourself, and you accept yourself enough that needing someone else's forgiveness isn't the issue. It's forgiving yourself.
Yeah, no, to be honest with you, man, that was a massive thing for me. I think I'd been in, maybe about I don't know, maybe 5 years later, after this had all happened, she messaged me one day and said, "Oh, I'm coming to Perth. Would you like to meet up?" And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, of course. This is my chance. This is my chance to apologize." And she ended up making plans with me and not showing up like 3 or 4 times. And even when she was leaving, she said, "Oh, can you give me a lift to the airport?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." I was like, even just for that chance just to speak to her in the car. And then she ended up going to the airport by herself. And I think after that was when I sat down with myself and said, "Man, you need to start really forgiving yourself for this. Like it's you've been too hard on yourself. This feeling like you need to apologize. Like you've done your best over the space of 4 or 5 years, however long it was, to try and apologize. Like maybe she's moved on. She keeps saying she's moved on. Maybe you should actually listen to her and maybe just be a little bit kinder to yourself. You know what I mean?" But I mean, even now, it's like when I think about that and like when I say it out loud, it's like, fuck, what a shit guy I was. But I just smile and think, you know what? I forgave myself for it. Don't punish yourself for it anymore. Like you were that person, but you've come such a long way since, and you've done such, maybe it needed to happen to help you be where you are right now.
Well, it did, but what lesson have you taken away from it? Because I think if you have a regret, and it sounds very much so like you still regret it, if you have a regret without there being a lesson in what you've done, then it stays a regret rather than a lesson.
That's exactly right. Like, it's something I said to one of my clients on Friday when I was sat talking to her. It's like, she said the same. She's got a lot of regrets in her life. And I said, well, a regret it's only a regret if you don't learn anything from it. And what I learned from it is to be more gentle to myself, to be kinder to myself. Because looking back on how I was before then, when I had my first couple of girlfriends, and even the years that I was on the ship, I was a massive cunt on the ship as well. Like I did all sorts of nasty things on there that were more not physically or anything like that, but emotionally nasty. That I was like, wow, you've got to forgive yourself for these. Be nicer to yourself, and if you're nicer to yourself, you'll be nicer to others. You soften yourself up a little bit.
So, yeah. When do you get to the point when it finally clicks and you're like, okay, I've got a lot of buried trauma, I've got a lot of buried shit that I haven't dealt with. I need to start looking at this and dealing with it and processing it so I can become a better person.
Yeah, this is years later, man. Like, well, I told you I got off on a tangent a little bit, but yeah, after I decided to run away back to cruise ships, man, that's where the real pain and trauma started to kick in. Like, I was drinking every night, like getting into the crew bar every night, making sure I'd have a good 6 to 12 beers, easy, if not more, every single night. And I remember going to one of the parties, and me and my mate decided to dress up like cross-dressing for some strange reason. And I remember being so fucking hammered, dressed in a dress, trying to flash people on the dance floor. I was a mess, man. And but that's the way I was, and I didn't stop there. I just carried on until one night, I just met a new girl, and I was still drinking a lot, like crazy. And I remember having an argument with her and some of her friends. Like they probably weren't saying anything to me, but I felt like they were saying something to me. And I just started shouting at them. And then we ended up having massive arguments. And that night I just went back to my cabin, carried on drinking more. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I've had enough. So I had one last drink, opened my door, went out my cabin, went to the side of the ship, climbed on the railings with all intention to jump off. And I stood there. I remember saying my last few words. And then for whatever reason, obviously I didn't do it, didn't commit suicide, but I had all the intention to jump off, and I'd had enough. Like really just, everything was just too much. Like trying to get over my granddad, trying to deal with the breakup of a relationship, trying to deal with another new relationship, trying to deal with new people, drinking. It was enough. I'd had enough. As I said, I don't know why I didn't do it. I don't know whether I bottled out or whether something inside of me told me not to do it, but I was very aware the next morning of what I'd done. Nobody else had any idea. Nobody knew, nobody saw me, nobody caught me, nobody found me. So I said to myself, wow, fuck, I've got to do something, man. Like, I've got to do something about this, or you know, that's going to happen again. I realized, I realized that morning that's like, I obviously don't want to kill myself, but something's got to change.
That's a good realization for someone. And can you pull your mic away again?
Yeah, sure.
That's a good realization.
Yeah, man.
It's a good realization for someone who didn't respect themselves, within a relationship, who ran away from all of their problems, to now think, oh shit, maybe my life is worth living. Maybe I should stay here.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it was strange, man. Like, I think it was because I was still so hungover at the time. I didn't really think about it too much. It was just black and white. It was like, well, I didn't kill myself, so there's obviously a reason for living, so I need to do something about it. And so the next day, I went straight away to the crew welfare officer, and she was great. She was a lovely woman, knew her really well. She sent me to the doctor. Doctor was great, really chatty, you know, had a lot of sympathy for me, asked me a few questions. Basically, all she said was, yeah, you got to stop drinking. I was like, well, no shit. And that was it in terms of help. And I just guess I just kind of had to figure shit out there for myself. I was like, okay, well, what do I do next? So I think it was a few months later that I finally decided to stop drinking. And one day just thought, you know what? Let's make a clean slate for it. You're doing all this hard work in the gym. Let's focus on something properly. And spent the next 3 months eating as clean as anything and not drinking a drop, hitting the gym twice a day, and just having something to fight for, having something to work for, even though it was small in comparison to life in general. Just having that thing to get up and work for every day was massive, man. Like, it really started to make me feel better about myself.
Yeah, it's almost like an introduction of purpose. For someone who felt like their life had no meaning, no purpose, so much so that they were going to throw themselves off of a ship, to now, like, finding your purpose within a gym. Even that's powerful enough to, you know, give you hope and push you through.
Yeah, man, it was powerful. Like, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've taken from everything that I've been through, is having something to fight for is so fucking important. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, going to the gym or a hobby or something that you want to achieve, a sport, anything in life. Like, just the smallest thing to fight for that gives you some sense of fulfillment or some sense of power is so important.
It is,
especially even if you're not depressed or suicidal. Like, it's still important to have. It's important to teach kids. I think it's what life's all about. We're born to fight at the end of the day. You know, as a baby, you're born to fight from your first breath, to breathe, to move, to live, and then it's constant from there on in. So to have something as simple as just looking after yourself and taking care of yourself and getting a little bit of positivity each day from knowing, yep, I made it, did that one little thing that I needed to do that day to make a difference. And I did it. And it's like, yeah, I can be proud of that.
That's amazing, man. I'm definitely snipping that. I'm snipping that one for Insta and Facebook.
Yeah.
Walk us through the rest of your recovery, brother. You spoke a little bit beforehand about putting yourself in uncomfortable positions to get better. The people around you, your environment, being able to open up in self-development.
Yeah, man. Like after ships, like you did ask like about how I managed to transition,
Yep.
and I guess after then, for me, it was okay. Well, there's these things that I want now that I'm very very aware of. I did my 90-day challenge or whatever it was, and it's like, well, I want more. What else? What is it that I've wanted for my entire life? What do I want? Number one was to be a dad, and number two was to move to Australia. So I was like, all right, how am I going to do this? So funnily enough, when I finished that contract, I was in Australia. So I was like, oh, should I just stay here? And then I looked at things, looked at my bank account, and thought, nah, yeah, no, we're not ready yet. So I went away and did one more contract. But that contract was done with the prime focus of accepting nothing else but moving to Australia. So left that ship, said no to a lot of relationships, said no to a lot of things that would possibly take me away. And funnily enough, got kicked off the ship in Fremantle. Not literally, but the last cruise that I did, the ship was coming out of dry dock and had a small explosion on the ship. And then we sailed down from Singapore all the way to Fremantle with no passengers, and then I got off. So it was like a little holiday before I left. So which is pretty awesome. And then found myself in Frio, and I was like, all right, let's do this. What have I got to lose? And so it's there where I first started going, okay, well, what can I do that's tough? So I was like, well, I did a couple of personal training qualifications when I was younger. Let's give that a shot. Complete career change, clean break. Let's do it. So I started learning again. And, I don't know for how many people have ever tried to move to Australia. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and it's definitely not the cheapest either. So 3 months in, no chance of getting to stay in Australia. Not a single clue about how I'm going to do it. No money in the bank, so I'm burning myself thin. So I'm like, all right, well, let's just make the most of it while I'm here. Let's learn as much as I can from where I am, and then we'll move on. So got myself a job in Canada, working for those basketball fans out there that know Steve Nash.
Nice.
Got a job working for Steve Nash. Got a house, got a car, got plane tickets, and as part of a personal training qualification, I think these days it's a little more, but at the time you had to do 20 hours of work experience as part of your qualification. I ended up doing 198 just to try and take as much in as I possibly could. And 3 days before I was about to leave, my boss offered me sponsorship for the gym. So I was like, "Are you fucking kidding? I just booked a flight. I got a house. I got a car. I got everything waiting for me over in Canada. And now you're offering me a job." And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Okay, I'll take it." And just stayed. It's as simple as that, really. It's still there. And then from there on in, mate, it was like, wow. I literally had no money left. I spent whatever I had left on a plane ticket. So it was, all right, I've literally got to crawl myself through. So the relationship that I was in at the time went to shit. She was threatening to kill herself in front of me. One night she called me around to the house and held a knife to her throat and said if I break up with her, she will kill herself, which was slightly traumatic. So then it was living in my own car for a little while, living in a caravan. Then finally got a place at a mate's house, and then moved to a nicer house and kept moving through. And yeah, everything was going good, man. Like I seemed to be moving quite well until I remember the day I got my PR. I think I'd been working and burying myself so hard just trying to survive. My lawyer phoned me up and said, "Oh, congratulations!" And I was like, "Oh, what's up?" And he goes, "Oh, we got your documents through. You've got permanent residency." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Anything else?" And he's like, "No." I was like, "All right, see ya." Put the phone down. That was it. Just got on my day like it was a normal thing. And then about a year later, I'd run up a hill for the first time, and I stood at the top and I looked out, and you could see the ocean. And I just thought, I looked down at my phone, and it was bang on a year since I got my residency, and I just started crying. And I was like, I can't believe I worked so hard for something that I wanted and never bothered to celebrate it. Like, what a fucking idiot. Like, how can you do that to yourself? Like, why were you so harsh to yourself again? Like, why have you got yourself back in this routine of just grinding and people pleasing? And that's when I started to look at my life and go, wow, like, I'm starting to get this feeling where I want to run away again. Like, the things just don't seem to be going the way I want them. And then I was lucky enough to meet a guy through my boss. And I keep saying my boss, he was actually my best man at my wedding. So he's actually a pretty good friend now. But I met this guy called George Halou, who's, I know you've talked to Blake on one of your podcasts, who's the co-founder of 540. I met him about 4 years ago, and he started to help me change my life. He started to help me look inside and realize who I was, what I've been doing to myself all these years, what I've been putting myself through, and helped me to realize, like, I'd met a beautiful, beautiful girl at the time, and it was, I could have run away, I could have broken the relationship up several times, could have done so many stupid things, but something in my heart told me that, no, I want to fight for this, like, fight for it. So I was lucky to be around him at the time, because he pretty much helped me through all the horrible shit I was going through, to learn that this guy that was giving so much was still there, that it's okay to take a little bit for yourself. Like, I used to freak out. Like, I always used to get to this point in a relationship where I'd say, the girl would go, Joey, you're amazing. And I was like, fuck, you've said it now. And that's it. I'd go, okay, let's do everything I can to ruin this relationship.
Yep. Self-sabotage is real when you can't accept yourself, hey?
Yeah, man. And when someone else is telling you that and you don't feel it, it's like, well, this is bullshit. This person's lying to me, obviously, so I'm out of here. And I remember my partner, who's now my wife, say it to me, and I was like, fuck, she said it. Oh, what the fuck am I going to do? So I was lucky enough to have George around and for him to help me through this. And I'm talking, man, I was doing stupid shit. Like, I wouldn't let her do my laundry. I look back at it now and go, what fucking stupid idiot is unhappy at their partner doing the laundry for them? And I'm like, that's like, you've cracked the code, buddy. Like, if somebody wants to do your shitty laundry, you have cracked it. Why do you want to run away from this? And to be able to learn to accept that and take it for what it was, and learn that it's nice to have people do things for you, not for any other reason, but the fact that they love you, and to accept that was fucking powerful.
That's
really
amazing,
really powerful.
Man. And that's, I've heard quite a few people that I respect actually talk about George that way, and the way that he's impacted and transformed their lives. So it's nice to hear another story of that. And could you give people a brief overview of what George did for you, and like what he offers for anyone who's considering using his services?
Well, I'm lucky enough now to be a coach underneath him. Like, he's one of my bosses now, which is great. So I get to do the work that he helped me do, which is fantastic. But for me, I just went in there and I realized for the first time that I need to be more open and courageous. And from moment one, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to open myself up and not give a fuck, because that's what I need to do I felt that's what I needed to do in order to grow. Is like, if you want stuff to open up for you, you got to open up for stuff. I was like, okay. So George sat with me, and I did his course called EP7, which is supposed to take 14 weeks. Ended up taking me close to 8 months, I think it was, to complete it. Like, we had lots of one-on-one sessions, lots of working through stuff. And I think a lot of the sessions we were supposed to be going through the coursework, it was just more like just having a chat to a mate that I didn't feel like I had at the time.
Yeah. And
it was nice for someone to listen and give honest, unemotional responses that actually were not just supportive, but eye-opening and raw and real and free of bullshit. And it was later on that he actually helped me to realize that through everything that I've been doing, like relationships, friends, people, bosses, everything, I'd been searching for a father figure in every single thing that I did, some attachment of a dad, because I needed it, especially after my granddad died. I was searching, like every peer that I had was not a friend, they were a surrogate dad. And it was mind-blowing when I realized that, because I realized it's fucking up all my relationships that I've ever had, especially with blokes. Like having good, solid male friendships was, few and far between.
Wow. That's profound.
Yeah, that was mad, man. And like, he's got a pretty cool process that he uses called the Reinvent You process, which you help break down your situation from understanding your feelings, your thoughts, your actions, and sort of creating your own little story, so to speak. But I remember going through this with him, and I was actually a coach at the time. This is after I passed through the course and I've become a coach, and I'm sitting there in a room full of people, and I just have this thought that was like, oh, maybe I need to dig into something. I've been going for a bit of a shit day. So I was like, all right, let's dig into this. I'm a little bit emotional. So I started writing myself. And I think I finally stopped writing about 7 hours later. I had a notepad full of about 5 pages of stuff of just angry, like just getting everything out on paper, just writing it down. And finally looked at it and I was like, holy fuck. Wow. That's what I've been doing all these years. And I just, that changed things for me from there, man. That's where I decided at the start of this year is like, I'm not going to take this New Year's resolution stuff for granted anymore. Like, as nice as it is to, make these New Year's resolutions in all hope of losing 10 kilos and I've got to change my life. I was like, you know what? No, I'm fucking changing my life. Like, now is time. I've sorted my shit out. I've got these beautiful tools to help me through every single emotional state that I can ever be in. I've got these tools there for me. And so I thought, you know what? First thing I'm going to do, not drink anymore. Game on. So no booze. Had my last beer, I think, about 5 past midnight on New Year's Eve, on New Year's Day. Then I was like, all right, what else can I do? It's like, well, I get up for work early every morning anyway, so let's get up earlier for work and sit down, have a little bit of peace time, have a coffee, just have a little bit of you time. Like, oh, okay, let's do this. Like, first few weeks, okay, that's difficult. I was like, oh, okay, what else can I do? And I was like, ice baths. You run a recovery center as well. Let's start jumping in ice baths every week. All right, fuck it. Ice baths, game on. Started having ice baths every week. That was hard. Started getting easier and easier, and I was like, all right, well, what next? So I start researching stuff. I find Shakti mat, which is basically mimics a bed of nails. Apparently it's supposed to be really good for you is what I read. So I thought, okay, if it's supposed to be good for you and it's painful, do it. Started doing that. That started helping me. That started helping me grow. I was like, all right, what's next? And there's this bloke at the gym that does massages. Works for the Frio Dockers. So I was like, all right, this guy must know his shit. Let's go for a massage with this guy. The most painful fucking massages you will ever have in your entire life. It feels like the guy's trying to rip your ligaments away from your bone, but it helps so much. But fuck me, is it painful? And that pain, I was like, if I can get through this, I can get through anything. So I started doing that once a week. Painful every time, but left feeling amazing. Then it's like, all right, well, starting to run out of things to do here now. So then I started listening to books, a lot of audio books. One of my favorites is by a guy called Jocko Willink and Leif Babin.
Yep.
Called The Dichotomy of Leadership. And what's the other one called? The earlier
Extreme
one,
Ownership.
Extreme Ownership, that's the one. Two of my favorite books. Learn a lot from those guys about like, wow, if they can do all this shit in the military where you're literally faced with death every day, like, wow, who am I to say I can't do it? So I thought, fuck it, start implementing some of their stuff. So started getting up even earlier, going for a run every morning at 3:30. Just taking shit on, just not saying no to challenges, not being like the yes man. I seem to be following Jim Carrey around for some reason, with the Truman Show and the yes man, but I don't know whether that's ironic or not. But
at least you're not liar.
Yeah, true. But just taking on challenges, man, and not saying no to them.
That's awesome, bro. It's pushing past fear and uncomfort to get to growth.
Yeah, and it's powerful in itself. Like, I guess at the same time as New Year, it's like you see things that people write, and especially on social media, they put up all these posts saying, "Oh, I hope fucking 2019 is better than 2018. 2018 was shit," and then halfway through the year saying 2019 better fuck off pretty quick. So I'm like, and then I look back and I think, wow, for all the stuff I've done, this has to be one of the most progressive years of my life. I put my beer down at midnight and said I'm not going to drink. And literally everything I've wanted to happen for myself has happened because I have made it happen. And that principle of extreme ownership has helped me more than anything, because I've just said, you know what, I need to own every fucking situation that I'm in. If it's shit, it's my fault. If things aren't going my way, it's my fault. I've got the power to do whatever I need to do to change it. I have got the strength to be able to do whatever I need to do to change it. It's not my partner's fault we're arguing. It's my fault. I'm not taking that on the chest and saying it's actually my fault that we're having an argument at this time, but I have the power to be able to stop the argument and slow it down and say to my missus, why are we doing this? I love you. Like, I don't want to have this toxic pain with you. Like, let's just calm it down a notch and, cool down and talk about things rationally rather than fire up at each other. Like,
yeah, that's powerful, man. And I think that's the power in taking responsibility for your life and accepting responsibility as something positive rather than negative, because people feel like, oh, so I'm going to take responsibility for everything that's happened to me, even the bad. Well, yes, because you put yourself in a position for bad shit to happen to you, just like you having someone cheat on you, or me having my high school girlfriend break up with me. We put ourselves in that position because we didn't value ourselves enough to have respect for ourselves. And so if you understand responsibility as something positive that can transform your life in a positive way, you'll transform your life like you have this year.
Yes, you couldn't be more right, mate. It's like, I'm not saying to people take on everybody else's shit and take on everybody else's pain, but if you don't want to be there, you don't have to be there. Like, as literal as it sounds, you have the power to do whatever it is that you want to do. I mean, how many times do you see people complaining about their situation? And it's like, well, logically, you can just walk out of the room. Logically, you can just move on. Like, although it might not be the nice thing to do, you can still do it. Like, it's like, okay, in modern day society, we need laws, but if you wanted to break a law, the only thing that's stopping you is you. And I know that's in a negative sense, but it works just as well and just as strong, if not stronger, in the positive sense. If you want to go out and do something, you can pick yourself up and do it anytime you want to do it. You just have to own the fact that you have that power.
And I think a powerful question to ask yourself when you're in a position that you're not happy or comfortable with is, how am I contributing to what's happening to me right now? Because in some way you are contributing to what's happening by either not taking action or being submissive or whatever. You're contributing, and once you take responsibility for that, you can change your fucking life. Simple as that.
Simple as that, man. It sounds simple, and the thing is, it's like, I try to put up a little post every day on Instagram after my run. I don't know why, I just seem to be a little bit more inspirational after a run. I think it's just the heart gets going, the emotions get flowing. But I said this morning, it's like, it's simple. Just break everything down into simple little things. Everything can be simple. It's you who makes it not simple. It's you that decides to make things complicated. It's you that decides to take on too much. Like, you can make things simple. It's yes or no. It's black and white. You know, even when it comes to things like depression, it's a fucking horrible shit place to be. I can say that from being in that spot for many different periods of my life. It's a shit place to be. But the biggest lesson from not jumping off the cruise ship is I decided to not do that. I decided to pick myself up the next day and go and do something about it. Then, you know, moving to Australia, I could have gone to Canada and taken the easy route out, but I chose not to. I chose to stay here and follow my dream. I chose to do that. And it comes across as big-headed and egotistical to some people, but you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the person next to you thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's like, I say it to so many people I speak to all the time. It's like, selfish does not have to be a bad word. You can be selfish. It's good to be selfish, because at the end of the day, if you're not happy and you're in a bad place and you're not looking after yourself and you're treating yourself like crap and you're trying your best, you're giving 100% of yourself to everybody else around you, you can be doing the very best job you can be doing and still feel like absolute shit and feel like you're not getting anywhere. Yet, if you choose to look after you and take ownership of you and do the things that you want to do and make yourself happy, do things that make you happy, you can give 20% to everybody else around you, and it's still more than that 100% of that shit version of you that you were before.
That's really awesome, bro. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes before I need to shoot off, my man. So,
me too, man.
we'll jump to knowing that you've gone through the trauma with your grandfather passing and your uncle passing, knowing that you buried a lot of it, and especially the stuff with your dad as well. How have you processed that for anyone who's dealing with buried trauma?
Well, this might be a little unconventional, but I got married last week, and a week before that, I was honestly shitting myself. Like, relationships for me have always been something to bury myself in. And when I was younger, relationships especially, it's like, oh, okay, I can jump from one relationship to the next relationship if I don't feel happy. I can find something new. So marriage for me it's a big thing. Not being religious, for one, was massive. But having that thought that, you know, I love my missus, I love my wife so much, but if anything went wrong, if I wasn't married, it's like, oh, there's always that potential, you know. So I had a very unconventional experience for my bachelor party. Like, usually it's strippers, alcohol, and cocaine for most bachelor parties. But for mine, no, I chose to go with a group of mates into the bushlands, sit in a teepee, and have a very psychedelic experience. And I remember at one point I was by myself outside, and I sat down, and I don't know, like, scientifically you can't prove any of this, and yes, I was, you know, I'd had something that put me in a different state, but I could swear to you 100% that I was talking to my granddad. And I was still, even though I was doing all these amazing things and having all these amazing experiences and really starting to own my life, I was still holding on to something. I was still holding on to something that I wasn't ready to get married. I wasn't ready to be a man. I wasn't ready to have a kid that I've got on the way. Like, there's something missing still. What am I not learning? What am I not getting? So I'm sat there and everything's disappeared out of my eyes. Like, I'm looking and everything is just green, and these green bands of energy going along everywhere. And I swear down that I was talking to my granddad. Whether I was or I wasn't, I don't know. But whether that was just me looking inside myself and letting go and realizing that everything I need to be a man, to be a husband, to be a dad, I've learned. Like, I am one tough motherfucker, and I've been through so much that has built me up to be this person that I am today. And I remember saying out loud to this energy that I thought was my granddad that I need to let you go now. Like, you've looked after me and taught me so much for all the years that you were around me, and even the years that you weren't. I need to let you go now, because I need to be that person that you were for me, to my future wife, to my kid, and for myself. Like, I need to start taking real ownership of that. And mate, that was 2 weeks ago. And since then, I've been in so much peace.
That's
so
beautiful.
much peace that I got married to my wife now. That was just 1 week ago. And there was no pain. There was no stress. There was no panic thinking that I was trapped. There was no nothing but just pure excitement for what was to come. And that was one thing that I realized I'd been missing for so many years, was that childish excitement that you seem to be able to explain it by Christmas Day as like an 8-year-old waiting to open presents. That excitement had been missing from my life for so many years, but I felt it on my wedding day. I felt it in the week leading up to it. And I can still feel it now. And it's learning from all of that and realizing to be able to dig deep enough and be vulnerable enough, not just to speak to people about this and to talk about problems and stresses and suicide and things like that, but to dig deep enough in myself to go to where I needed to go to, those dark, deep, emotional places buried inside of you, to be able to realize that, man, I just can't wait for my kids to come along, man, because they're going to get such a fucking good person. Such a good dad.
That's amazing, brother.
Yeah.
Last question before we wrap up. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard somewhere you know thousands of people would see it, what would that message be?
Man, good question. There's lots of messages I could put up, but own you.
That's a good one.
Simple as that, man. Like, own you. Like, you are the person that can be happy for you, and that happy person can transform anything that you want to transform, whether it's people, your job, your workplace, the world, whatever it is, man. Own you, and you can own everything around you.
That's beautiful, brother. To wrap up, I want to acknowledge you for making time to do this, but for most of all, for knowing what you've been through and now what you're doing with the Fu3k Suicide Podcast. It's beautiful, brother. It's powerful, and I know you're just going to keep changing lives from here on out.
Thanks, brother, and thanks for having me on. It's like been meaning to do this for a while, but it seems like it's come together at the right time, man.
Thank you, bro. Take care, eh?
No worries. Take care too, dude.
Bye.
Peace.